if for whatever reason, all of a sudden she's got to pay fees to her internet service provider that go beyond hosting and bandwidth and everything else that's involved in all that, it breaks her ability to actually be a small business owner and goes out of business. I mean, that doesn't serve anybody. That's...
Yeah, anytime you create additional fees, additional startup costs, additional operating expenses, it makes it extremely hard for entrepreneurs to get going. The big guy can afford it. Welcome to the John and Joe Show, JonAndJoeShow.com, where we talk about leadership, community, and random musings. I'm Jonathan Schober, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Joey McGurr. Which, okay, now here's a random musing. Have you been paying attention to the FCC regulations and how it relates to internet regulations?
Tell me about this. This sounds good.
So this is actually pretty cool. So the first thing that's interesting about it is
going to affect the podcast. Sorry. Go
on. The first thing is literally no one knows what's in it. So if you've been paying attention to the space, the FCC has been going through a process whether or not they wanted to regulate the internet in the same way that they regulated like the phone companies back in the 1920s and 30s.
Such a 19th century way of thinking.
Exactly.
At the very least, the 20th century.
Yeah, here's what we know. We know it was a 300-plus regulation. We know that there was no public commentary on it. It was not released to the public. We know that...
Of course not, because we tear it apart.
Yeah, what do we want to know about
it? We'd get a hold of it and tear it to pieces. Yeah, that's why they don't want us to have it.
You know, there was certainly a lot of things being said about net neutrality, which I'll go into that in a second. Yeah. But literally, so they vote, and we now have the same regulation as, AT&T, which, remember when there was only one phone company?
Yeah.
We now have that same kind of regulatory regime, and it'll literally be another couple weeks before we even see the regulations, and this is going to be, years of litigation back and forth, and I do think it's a pretty detrimental thing. I mean, look at what we're doing. For $10, I can set up a website. For $10, I can do video hosting. For free. We're sitting here on a Google Hangout for free.
We don't pay Google host it. We don't pay anything for it.
Yeah. At my location, if I want internet, I can go Time Warner, I can do Suddenlink, I can do AT&T. There's probably another vendor that could give me internet access here at the house. And I mean, we laugh, but this thing that we call the internet didn't even exist 25 years ago.
Yep.
And
it did, but it sounded like this.
Here's an amazing stat. Right now, you want to take a random guess how many people right now have smartphones in the world?
I would guess somewhere between 2 and 3 billion.
It is 2 billion, which is 1/4
of the
world's population.
And we all sleep within 4 feet of them.
Absolutely. And what they're saying in 10 years, it'll be 4 billion. 1 in 2 people.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like, we're getting down to like
what's that number in America? I mean, it's got to be 200 million easily.
Easy. I mean,
every adult and a lot of kids, 14 to 18. I imagine most kids 14 to 18 have one.
Yeah. I think it took, if I remember, from the time that the first phone was invented until it was all, the whole country was wired for phones, was something like 80 years.
Mm-hmm. Infrastructure.
Yeah, infrastructure.
We have the tower technology went up very quick with cell phones.
Yeah, I remember being in Venezuela in the late 90s. It was right when Chavez was kind of coming to power and stuff, and it wasn't quite as bad as it is now. But we would go there, and everybody had a cell phone. Mm-hmm. I mean, you'd be in like the slums, and everybody had a cell phone. Mm-hmm. And that's how fast that this technology is done. So I'm not a big fan of, anytime I hear regulation in general, I'm not a big fan of it at all.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm certainly not a fan of regulation that's done without any kind of public commentary. And, I know what's been sold is this whole net neutrality. Hey, I don't want Comcast to limit Netflix. I think people are going to be sorely surprised. And unfortunately, I think it's going to really limit innovation and limit people from being able to do the next thing. Certainly the major players, innovation just got cut off because no one's going to make a move for the next 3 or 4 years.
Until they know when they can.
Until they know what the regulatory change is going to be.
Right.
So, if you thought you were going to have Google Fiber, not going to happen anytime in the near future. Because, why would Google roll out additional infrastructure when they literally don't even know what the regulatory landscape will be? And it'll take, it'll take 3 to 5 years for this to shake out from a, court system, because everyone's going to sue everybody right now.
Well, we'll see. I know that in Europe, they feel that Google's too much of a monopoly over there. So they're trying to break Google. Europe is trying to break Google up in Europe.
Kind of like they tried to do with Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can see both sides of the argument, but I'm with you. I don't want any kind of, this little regulatory control as we need is what I'm looking for. But, I don't, the internet's not broken. There's nothing wrong with the internet.
No.
It's that people want to control things they don't understand.
Right.
And they also see a way that they can monetize it if they can have the control.
Well, yeah. Every government out there, sees it as a huge source of tax revenue, whether it's sales tax or direct, internet tax or whatever. It's just a huge pot of money that everybody wants to get. Every government out there wants to get their hands on the money.
Well, I was just talking to a very enterprising young woman I've known for a couple of years now, and she was telling me about this new business she's doing, and it's all hers, and it's essentially meal plans. So you subscribe, and every week you get a meal plan.
Okay.
The plan comes with what items to buy, how many, your shopping list, and the shopping list is paired to a recipe for each meal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all 7 days, and you get that every week, and it's $10 a month, it's like $9.95.
Wow.
Very, very ridiculously reasonable. So she's telling me that she started in February, so she's a month into it, and I said, well, how's it going? She goes, well, I have 20 subscribers. So we start discussing, like, how do you get more subscribers? And she was kind of asking me and picking my brain, and I just said, why don't you give the first 1,000 people that subscribe $1 a month? Because for one, you have 20 people paying you $10 a month, you're making $200. If you get 1,000 people to pay you $1, you just grew fivefold.
Okay.
But you also go from 20 subscribers to 1,000 subscribers, and the multiplier there it's pretty obvious,
right?
The value in it. And then 2,000 or 1,001, right? You get 1,000 people, they all get it for $1 a month. Number 1,001, they're paying $9.99, but they're doing it because they saw 1,000 people saw value in it, and they go to the website, and the ticket price is $9.99. They don't question whether the fact that their friend's paying $1 a month for it or whatever. They see there's value in it. There's already value in it. She just needs to build that audience base. And what you're saying with the whole, if for whatever reason all of a sudden she's got to pay fees to her internet service provider that go beyond, with hosting and bandwidth and everything else that's involved in all that, it breaks her ability to actually be a small business owner.
Yeah.
And goes out of business. That doesn't serve anybody.
Anytime you create, additional fees, additional startup cost, additional operating expenses, it makes it extremely hard for entrepreneurs to get going.
Yeah.
The only one that is protected are, and this is the counterintuitive point, because everyone's trying to get, hey, let's rein in the big guy. The big guy can afford it. They have the leverage, they have the capability to where, if a new tax comes on, we're going to pay for it anyway.
Right.
And trust me, they're not absorbing it. They are passing it through to their consumer.
They are.
We're
going to feel it.
It's
a lose-lose for everyone.
It's a lose-lose. And so what happens is then the startup guy, the next Dollar General that's kind of taken on Walmart, it's that much harder for them to keep going, because the taxes and the regulatory fees create those barriers of entry, and it only affects the little startup guy.
This has been another episode of the John and Joe Show. You can connect with John and Joey on their website at JonAndJoeShow.com. Be sure to subscribe to their YouTube channel, follow them on Twitter, and like them on Facebook. Just search for John and Joe Show. You can also find their podcast on iTunes and in Stitcher.